here we're going to get right into our tutorial. So first we're making the circle part of our granny square, and you start off by making a magic circle and chaining 1. Then you want to make 5 single crochet stitches into that circle, and make sure that you don't make them tight. You want them to be nice and somewhat loose, but not overly loose. The reason for this is that in the next few rounds we will be working in the waistcoat stitch, which involves single crocheting through that center V of the stitch from the previous round, and it's a lot easier if your stitches aren't too tight. So here we have our 5 single crochet stitches, and then the chain 1 from the beginning, which counts as our first stitch, so you should have a total of 6 stitches. And then you'll close this round and every following round with a invisible closure. And you do this by inserting your hook around from the back around the first stitch of that round and pulling through a loop. You'll carefully remove that loop from your hook, and then you take your hook and putting it underneath the loop that you just created, insert it through that chain from the beginning. And now you're going to yarn over and draw up a loop. And then to finish off, you will put the loop that you left hanging there back on your hook, yarn over again, and draw through one more loop. And this creates not only the invisible closure, but the first stitch of the next round. And this will be the case for every round following this. So that's your first stitch. And so now we're on round 2. And in round 2, you place 2 waistcoat single crochet stitches into every stitch around. And so we're starting to make our increases. So that first chain counts as your first stitch, so you're going to make 1 more single crochet into that stitch. And now looking over here, you're going to insert, see the V in that next stitch, you're going to insert your hook into that V, make a waistcoat single crochet stitch, and then 1 more. And then we're going to continue this all the way around until we get to the end of this round. And so when you get to the end, you should have a total of 12 stitches. So if you notice, as I'm working, the center of my circle is starting to expand a little bit, and that's okay. That's why we left our beginning tail out. We'll be able to pull this tail and it'll close up the circle as we go. As we're working, we're doing a lot of pulling and tugging, and it's causing that circle to come loose, which is fine. Definitely a tip is not to weave in your beginning tail until you're completely done with your circle, so that you'll be able to use it to close the circle as you're working. So we're at the end of round 2, and once again we're going to close the round with an invisible join. Okay, and once again you'll take your hook, insert it to the back here around that stitch from the beginning, pull through a loop, and then carefully remove it from your hook. Insert your hook into the chain from the beginning and draw up a loop, and then place the loop that you left hanging from the beginning back on your hook, yarn over, and draw up a loop, and you have your first stitch of round 3. And so for round 3, you'll place 1 waistcoat single crochet stitch in the first stitch, and then 2 waistcoat single crochets in the next stitch, and you repeat this pattern around until you get to the end. And when you get to the end of round 3, you should have a total of 18 stitches. Keep in mind, we are working through using the waistcoat stitch for all of our rounds. And so you should notice that round 3 is definitely much easier to work than round 2. It's just the nature of it. I always find that round 2 is still, it doesn't matter how well you did your tension for round 1, round 2 is always a little bit difficult getting your hook through the center of those stitches. So don't mind if you feel like you're struggling a little bit, it's normal. So rounds 3 and 4 are definitely not as bad, and you should be able to cruise through those pretty quickly. End of round 3, and we will close it off with our invisible join. And I love this technique because it makes it hard for anyone to see where your seam is. So it's lovely if you're using the waistcoat stitch. And so now finally for round 4, we will make 1 single crochet in the first 2 stitches, and then in the next stitch we'll make 2 single crochets into that stitch. And so we'll continue in this pattern around until we get to the end, and you should have a total of 24 stitches once you get to the end of this round. Okay, so round 4 is complete. Cut your cord, and we'll finish off our circle with an invisible closure. And it's similar to our invisible join. Just pull that end tail all the way through, and then pull it around that first stitch that we created. You're going to insert your stitch into the last single crochet that you made and pull the tail through the top of the V of that stitch. And if you look and notice, our closure now looks like the top of our other stitches. And so from here, all you have to do is weave your tails, the beginning and the ending tails, and then you're ready to proceed on to the next part of this granny square, which will turn our circle into a square. So I'm going to come back once I finish weaving my ends, and we'll get right into that part of the tutorial. Okay, so we've made it to round 5, and this is our last round. So insert your hook into any stitch around on your circle, and you're going to join it and chain 3. So leave a little bit of a tail because we will crochet around this as we're going to make sure it's nice and secured, and so that we don't have to go back and weave that in later. And so first you start off by making a double crochet stitch into the next 2 stitches. And then once we complete these 2, we will work our first corner. And so our corner consists of 2 treble crochets, sometimes also referred to as a triple crochet, a chain 2, and then 2 more treble crochets. So here, 1 treble crochet, then I'm making another treble crochet, all in that same stitch, chain 1 and 2, and then make another treble crochet, and then finally make 1 more treble crochet. And that completes our first corner. And so your corners, all of your corners in this round will be made exactly the same. And so now we are going to make 5 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And now we're ready to make another corner. So again, that's 2 treble crochets, chain 2, and 2 treble crochets. And so you'll continue around making 5 double crochet stitches and then the corner stitch so you get to the last 2 stitches. So I've skipped ahead here to that final corner stitch, And in those last stitches, I'm just going to make one double crochet stitch into each of them. And now you're complete. And as you see, we have our square now. And so you want to cut your cord and finish off this round with an invisible closure, and then weave your ends. Now we're ready to make the smiley face. So this works up pretty fast, and you can do it in whatever order you like. I prefer to make the eyes and the mouth first, and then I make the outline around the circle last. The best tip that I can give you in doing this part is to make sure that you are not sewing through the cord, but that you're using your needle to kind of feel around for spaces that are in between the cord and pull it through that way. If you choose to sew through the cord, it will make your process slow moving, and it's actually tough, and you'll start to kind of split the cord, and you don't want that. So feel around. You can use your eyes, but definitely feel around until you find those gaps where your needle can easily just slide on through, and then continue on. And so I'll show you here, after I make the top of the smiley face, I accidentally sewed through the cord, and you'll see how it splits the cord a little bit, and I had to trim it away. So here I got a little snag. So I tried to fix it and pull it out, but that was a no-go, so I trimmed that little piece and continued on. So just be careful as you're working your way through and sew through the spaces. So I'm going to finish this part and then come back once I'm done. The final granny square, and you can do so many things with them. Make coasters, trivets. I'm going to make a bag, and I'm going to seam it together using the slip stitch method. So there's multiple methods, but this one is my favorite because it creates a nice braided detail. Here is the back of your square. It is not pretty, so keep in mind if you're making a bag or something where this will be exposed, definitely I suggest that you line it so that you can hide away that area. And so for the bag that I'm making, I needed 14 squares, and so I'm going to show you how I seamed them together. It's not going to be a detailed tutorial, just a quick run through, but you can find the detailed explanation on my blog. So if you head on over to yarntheory.com, you'll see a detailed explanation of how it's created, how I lay it out, and it'll walk you through the process. So first, I like to lay out how I want to seam my squares together, and then I begin to work it. I prefer to have the least amount of seams as possible. So here I'm starting off with my horizontal seam, and I'm actually going to seam together the top 12 squares first, just so I can get them together. I like to work from right to left, and I'll be inserting my hook through the center of the right stitch, and then inserting it into the center of the left stitch, yarning over and drawing a loop through both, and that creates my first slip stitch. And so then I'll continue to slip stitch down that row, seaming them together until I get to the corner where we have our chain 2 space. And when I get to the corner, I'm only going to slip stitch into that first chain that I come to. I'm going to skip the other one because when I do my vertical seam, I will seam it together with that as I'm working the vertical seam. And so I'm just going to continue on slip stitching and then adding my next 2 squares and continuing down the line until those first 12 squares are together. And those first 12 squares are the front and back panels of the bag and also the 2 side panels. And so I'm going to speed through this part, and then the next thing I would do is seam my last 2 squares to horizontally to the bottom of my bag, and that is the bottom panel of the bag. And so you can seam your squares together in whatever order you please, but this is just my favorite. And so here's the bag after all of the squares are seamed together with the slip stitches, and then you work your handle. And so again, a detailed explanation of how I create the handles and how I seam them together are available on my blog, so definitely head over to yarntheory.com and check that out. The link is in the description box. And so here is the completed bag. I have 4 panels on the front, 4 on the back, 2 on each side, and 2 on the bottom. And quickly I'll show you the inside of the bag, and as you can see, the details from making the smiley face are exposed, so I highly recommend that you not only weave your ends, but line the bag so you can have a nice clean finish. That completes our tutorial. If you have any questions, don't forget to leave them in the comments below. You can check out a detailed explanation of how to create this bag on my blog. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed and come back. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye!